In today's devotional study for Spotlight Matthew, we come to the seventh and final of Jesus' parables of the kingdom found in Matthew chapter 13. This one is entitled The Parable of the Dragnet, or I like it to call it the Parable of the Great Reckoning. The Parable of the Great Reckoning. It is found in verses 47 through 50. And you'll hear that it parallels in many, many ways an earlier one of these seven parables, the parable of the wheat and the weed. So you might want to review that parable from earlier in this chapter to see some similar themes. Wheat and the weeds is a little more sophisticated and intricate. This one is just straightforward and plain to make a single compelling point by Jesus. So let's listen to our text for today. Chapter 13, verses 47 through 50. Jesus said, "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. When it was full, the men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into the containers, but threw the bad away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Well, this is a simple illustration. Obviously, it has to do with fishing. They're by the Sea of Galilee, crossing the Sea of Galilee in boats regularly. We saw way back from chapter 4 that 4 of Jesus' disciples, Peter and Andrew, James and John, were fishermen by trade. And so this would have been a very common picture in that part of the country, in Galilee of the Gentiles, to see fishermen out in their boats, and they would cast a drag net out into the sea, and it would drag it along the bottom and along through the water. And of course, it indiscriminately would pick up all kinds of things. Some of the fish and other creatures would be good for a catch and useful to sell. But then many others would be unwholesome, unuseful, and these would be thrown out. And that's as simple as this illustration is that Jesus uses here in this parable. And Jesus is saying that just as we saw in the wheat and the weeds, as the wheat grew on one hand and the weeds together until the end of the age, so the dragnet, so history, so time is full of people who are good and people who are bad. It's full of that which is true and that which is false. It knows of that which is righteous and unrighteous. It experiences love and hatred. And most importantly, it has those who respond and accept the offer of the kingdom that Jesus is announcing in his ministry and in his words and in his actions, and is full of people who outright will reject that message at one and the same time. And so Jesus says you can anticipate and expect that in this life there will be this flip-flopping and this coming together and this mixing of what is all kinds of good, evil, white and black, gray and in between. And we just have to expect that that's part of the world we live in. It's a fallen world, but also a grace-filled world at one and the same time. But Jesus says that at the end of the age, God will bring about the separation, even as the fishermen come out of the sea and separate the good from the bad, so will God in the final judgment. And for that which is bad, Jesus says that it will not just be thrown out, it will be thrown into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The difference between this and the parable of the wheat and the weeds is that in the wheat and the weeds, Jesus concludes by saying that the weeds will be thrown into the fiery furnace, but the wheat will be stored in the barns. Jesus does not give that positive piece in this final parable about the good fish being gathered in a good way, or the good catch being brought together in a positive way. He leaves it on the negative note that that which is bad, that which is to be discarded, will be thrown into the furnace and burned with weeping and gnashing of teeth. So Jesus just ends on this very sober note of warning to people to beware, to be on guard, to be looking to their lives and their souls to see if indeed they are among God's people, seeking first the kingdom and its righteousness, so that God can add all things to them, or whether indeed they are with the scribes and the Pharisees, mounting their opposition, or perhaps just like the crowd who loves to get the benefits of Jesus sometimes, but is not truly interested in repenting because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. This is a stern word in the final of the 7 parables of the kingdom. But we need to take it to heart and realize that God points to a great final eschatological day when judgment will occur. I think there's no better commentary for this little parable than for us to turn to the book of Revelation and to look at Revelation chapter 20, and we will be reading from verses 11 through 15. Listen closely to how St. John, in the final book of the New Testament and of the Bible, speaks of this great coming judgment. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done. And the sea gave up its dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name is not found written in the book of life, he is thrown into the lake of fire. Those sobering words indeed are the ones which Jesus is emphasizing at the end of the parable of the dragnet. If we turn in Revelation from chapter 20 to 21, we get the new heavens and the new earth, the good and the blessed. But that's not where Jesus leaves this parable. He leaves us to contemplate that horrible end and to look to our souls and the souls of others so that they may not indeed suffer that fate. This is indeed our Spotlight Matthew. It's the bad news that we have to understand and accept, come to terms with, that precedes the good news of the gospel, that there is salvation and there is deliverance, there is a Redeemer, and there is a way out, and his name is Jesus. Thanks so much for joining us. Always like us on Facebook and share us with others if you find this to be helpful. Go to spotlightgoodnews.com for more, and we'll talk to you next time.